So we've covered a lot of details on crop planning, really just an overview, because as I said, we're gonna take a look at this much more detail when we look at the crop planning spreadsheet. So let's shift a little bit into the financial side. And what we're going to look at here are just some of our costs and what the revenue model looks like. And once again, this is going to be a very, very high level overview. I will give you a disclaimer at this point that I am not an economist. Even though I've run a microgreens business and other businesses, I'm much more the production guy. I'm the figure stuff out guy. The numbers generally just work themselves out, but it really helps to know these concepts, and I definitely use all these concepts in planning, especially at the start. And so, yeah, there are definitely some great resources out there for understanding the economics and financials of agriculture. So this is going to just be a broad overview, and then the crop planning and financial planning spreadsheet will really go into a lot more detail about how we use these things to understand the costs of production and the overall costs of our business. So let's start here with variable costs. And actually, I'm going to step back here. I just threw this little slide in here in general because it's important to understand that the costs you are going to incur, whether they are fixed costs or operational costs or your variable costs with production, are going to be much more than you anticipate. And I say this because I see a lot of microgreens training material out there that says, you need $500 in these 5 things to get started. But that kind of assumes you've got a whole bunch of other things. You need seed, soil, trays, and something else to grow. Well, you need something to water with, and you need gloves, and you need a knife for cutting and a bin to put that stuff in. And so I like to go into this detail so you are much more aware of the reality that you're going to face, because there are a lot of what I would call sort of hidden costs or minor costs which just chip away at your profit. So it's really important to understand this and be prepared to spend, in essence, more than you anticipate, though what the idea of this training is to show you what you should anticipate. And you saw earlier the stuff we covered in terms of infrastructure and all the inputs. And in the crop planner, we put a detailed list in there of some of the infrastructure and most of the equipment you're going to need to buy, as well as what your sort of business costs might look like. So hopefully that allows you to move ahead with a much better sense of what your actual costs are going to look like. So now we can move on to variable costs. So some of you may know the concept of variable costs much better than me. But your variable costs are the costs that change depending on how much production you are doing. So, if you're paying rent in a warehouse, it doesn't matter whether you're producing 1 tray or 1,000 trays a day, your rent stays the same generally, but other costs might shift. So some of these are quite obvious in terms of the inputs that we've discussed already. Your seeds, your soil, your packaging, those are really going to change with how much you're producing. And then your labor is going to change if you need more people for harvest and deliveries. And if you're doing something like farmers markets, you're going to have lots more fees related to those. So that's going to depend on what you're deciding to do and how often you're attending markets and things like that. I put markets in here because, I'd never thought about market fees a lot, but in a given year, you could spend $5,000 on different market fees. So it's an important thing to consider. And these are all things that are just very, very much related to how much you're producing, how you're distributing it. So keep this in mind that these costs will change on a regular basis. So let's go take a look now at some of the other costs, our more fixed infrastructure costs and what I call our business or operational costs.